It's a big mistake to think that people in the ancient world were automatically dumber than we are. Maybe they had a different way of thinking about things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were stupid or that they couldn't understand the difference between a figure of speech and a hard and fast reality. So when we talk about Jesus ascending into heaven, we're not talking about Jesus kind of shooting up off the earth, making a left turn at the moon, and then swinging around Jupiter before the Horseshoe Nebula came into view. We're talking about Jesus entering a completely different realm, the realm of God, the presence of God, a dimension beyond anything we can understand, a dimension beyond dimensions. I was about to say a time beyond time, but even time would be non-existent. When we talk about Jesus ascending to heaven, we're talking about a human being, Jesus, who had embodied God and brought God to us. Now taking human nature to be in God's presence. Not necessarily in a physical, localized kind of a way. The Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, I can't even say his name, and he's not really Russian, Soviet, I should say. Yuri Gagarin, who was the first man in space. When he came back from space, was being interviewed, and he, being a good Soviet, offered the party line. When he was asked about what it was like, he said, "I looked and I looked and I looked and I didn't see God." That's a shame. I would think that anybody who got a view of the earth from space would see God not in a literal way, but would sort of be put in their place as a human being. The Psalms say, when I look at the skies, the moon and the stars that you have created, what is a human being that you care for us? That's the response that I think is the proper thing when you go into space. But to get back to it, we're not really talking about going up or even just going out. We're talking about going to a different level of existence. And if God comes to know from the inside and experience what we experience, then Jesus' return to God takes human nature to experience eternity. And there we're told he takes his place at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty, which was the place that an honored person sat in the presence of the monarch, if you even were allowed to sit. Showing somebody to be part of the monarch's rule, so that a human being, Jesus, now is part of God's rule over the whole universe. We're not left out. We're not put down. And though we may say with the psalmist, what are we? Tiny little human beings. But the psalmist did continue, and yet you have given us dominion over the works of your hands. Human beings are small, and yet enough to be there at God's right hand in the person of Jesus. And the added thing is, if you want to think of it in these terms, he can sort of act as our advocate in God's presence. Yes, God is present everywhere. But when the time comes, the time ends, and we continue in the reality that is beyond this one. Let's call it heaven. We have somebody that's gone there before us, representing us. And when we speak now, our needs, our concerns, our hopes, our joys, our sadness, anything that we speak now, he can present before God himself. Again, these prepositions, before, in, around, near, at the right hand of God. Those are all figures of speech, but because we are who we are, that's what we have to go with. But we have somebody who's in a position to speak what we can't. And that's what the ascension is about. So come back tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to talk about what else may go on in eternity.